Startup businesses can be incredibly chaotic, especially in the early stages. So, a very common question among new entrepreneurs is, what is the number one priority in a brand new startup? How should you be spending your time and your energy as an entrepreneur in the very early stages of a new business? Now, this topic was inspired by Alexa, who recently posted a YouTube comment asking how to best spend their time, resources, and money in a new business. Now, the number one priority in a new business is to identify the core make or break assumptions behind the idea, and then to find ways to test and validate those assumptions as inexpensively and as quickly as possible. Now, this is an idea that was presented in The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, and a perfect example of how this works in the real world from the book involves Zappos, the incredibly popular online shoe retailer. And Zappos, in the early days, before they were the wildly successful company that they are today, they needed to identify whether or not people were actually willing to buy shoes online. So one of the core assumptions behind their entire business was that people would be willing to go online to place an order for shoes and have those shoes arrive by mail. And so they formed a hypothesis around this idea, thinking, yes, people would be willing to buy shoes online if given the opportunity. Now, what a lot of entrepreneurs would do to test this hypothesis is they'd first start to build out the full functional business. So they'd invest in things like logistics and inventory and warehousing and an e-commerce platform and all kinds of things that, number one, take a lot of time and energy to put together, but also cost a lot of money and can take up a lot of other resources. So instead of doing any of that, they sought to validate their idea as quickly and as inexpensively as possible. And what they did is they went to local shoe stores, they took a digital camera, they took pictures of the inventory in those stores, they talked to the managers, and they explained, we're going to post these pictures on an online store. If customers buy the shoes, we will come back to your store, we will pay full retail price for the shoes, then we will ship them out to the customer. So they weren't trying to maximize profitability. They weren't trying to nail their logistics. They weren't trying to guess what shoe styles and what sizes and what age groups and demographics they should focus on or any of that. They simply took pictures of existing inventory from local shoe stores and they listed it on their website. And this is a perfect example of how to take a core fundamental assumption behind the business to skip all of the complexity of building out your business functionality and simply finding ways to validate whether or not you're onto something, whether or not you're moving in the right direction. Now, the Lean Startup covers two examples or two categories of assumptions that you're going to want to focus on very early on. There are many other categories. There are all kinds of assumptions that you might make with a business, but two of the most important include number one, the value assumption, and number two, the growth assumption. So when it comes to the value assumption, the idea here is, regardless of what it is that you're bringing to market, whether it's a product or a service or an experience or anything else, there is this underlying assumption that people are going to value what it is that you're bringing to the market. And this is an assumption. You can't know this with total certainty. So you want to get very clear on what that assumption is. And then, as with Zappos, you want to look for opportunities to test and validate, or in some cases, invalidate those assumptions as quickly and as inexpensively as possible. And if it turns out you invalidate the assumption, well, then you save a lot of time and energy and you can pursue a different opportunity, or you can adjust your strategy and then test it again to find out whether or not you're closer to the mark. Now, the second one is the growth assumption. And this assumption relates to how you plan to attract customers over time. So every business, if it's going to be successful, if it's going to be sustainable, needs a predictable and reliable way to attract new customers into the business. And part of this is also the business model itself, how you plan to sell to those customers in order to grow the business. So you want to get very clear on how it is that you're expecting to attract customers to your business. Maybe you're setting up shop in a local mall and you expect the foot traffic to be there, or maybe you're online and you think you're going to pay for ads using Facebook or Google ads, whatever it might be, no matter what your business model is, there is going to be an underlying assumption around how you plan to attract customers and the business model by which you plan to capitalize on having those customers turn into paying customers that then make the business sustainable. So those are two great examples of the areas that you want to focus on first: the value assumption and the growth assumption. And in either case, what you want to do is not just identify the assumption, but make a clear hypothesis. Be very clear amongst your team, or if it's just you starting the business, get very clear on exactly what it is that you predict will happen. You want to form a hypothesis because then you know exactly what to test and whether you're validating or invalidating it. The mistake that many people make, as explained in the Lean Startup, is they identify their assumption and then they just start trying things, when in reality, you want to get clear on what it is that you expected was going to happen. That way you can properly validate or invalidate the hypothesis. Now, it's worth pointing out that even after you validate your value hypothesis and your growth hypothesis, there's always another assumption to be made in business. And so this isn't something that's limited to just the early stages of your business. Even after you're set up and you're selling a great product and you're attracting customers, there are other assumptions that you're going to make. So for example, you might decide to pursue new marketing channels. And you might say, okay, we've mastered, let's say, Facebook advertising. Now we think Google advertising is our next great opportunity. Well, that is an assumption. So new marketing channels, new suppliers, new products, new partnerships, all kinds of new opportunities that you might plan to pursue. With each one of those, there are going to be underlying assumptions. In fact, this strategy of the value hypothesis and the growth hypothesis really applies to every new product or service that you plan to launch into the future. So you really want to develop a mindset where you're always asking, what are the most critical assumptions that I'm making moving forward? Whatever it is that you're pursuing, you want to continue to ask yourself almost habitually, what is the assumption that I'm making right now in regards to this latest project or this latest venture or this latest initiative? And then again, you want to get clear on the assumptions. You want to form hypotheses around what you expect will happen. And then you want to find inexpensive and quick ways to validate or invalidate those assumptions. So that is what you should be focused on primarily, especially really early on in a brand new startup. And again, this is something that you can even pursue and continue to engage in as you get further along in a business. Now, if you could ask me any one question to do with business strategy, digital marketing, or entrepreneurship in general, what would your single most important question be? I invite you to post a comment down below this video where you let me know a little bit about your business, who your target audience is, and what your single most important question is. And I'll do my best to keep up with the questions in the comment section. And when a question has broader appeal, where I feel that other people would be interested in the response as well, I may create a follow-up video where I go into more detail on that question. So be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so that you get an alert when I publish future videos in case I end up answering your question in video, in addition to responding in the comment section. So think of your most important question, post it down in the comment section below, and I look forward to hearing from you.